Welcome to another edition of the show, Frontier Opening Bell. I'm Temple Ashaju. Chimauka Dike joins us from Vetiva Capital Management. Thank you for coming through. Ali Kansachu from Nairobi, I appreciate your presence. I'm Bosun Amofaye, Executive Editor at Frontier Africa Reports. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being on the show this Monday morning. Let's look at the markets. Where did we finish off last week? We've got the Nigerian Stock Exchange on a week-to-date basis down by 15 basis points. And you have the BRVM Stock Exchange positive on Friday, specifically by some 42 basis points. Egypt Stock Exchange was up by more than 2%. Nairobi Stock Exchange went higher, flew by 4.09% on a week-to-date basis for the entire 5-day trading session. And of course, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange jumped by 1.29% on Friday specifically. Let's look at the Eastern African headlines before us. Kenya, Canada, Inc. Memorandum of Understanding on Bilateral Trade and Investments. You have US Export-Import Africa Trade webinar holding today. Standard Chartered Bank Zambia has got the earnings per share contracting by 500%. And of course, interest income was down by 11%. Full results out today. Kenya's CP appoints a deposit insurer as Chase Bank liquidator. You have Statistics Uganda launching rebased consumer price index series. Ethiopia, Abay Bank's profits stagnates at 501.2 million birr in the 2019-2020 fiscal year, or financial year, I should say. I beg your pardon. Ali, let's come to you with these headlines to help us make sense of them.
Yes, thank you. So first, let me start with what has been quite a good performance at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. As you said, up over 4%. And we've also had the shilling strengthening. So that's giving people a double pop on their investments at the NSE. Looking at your headlines, let me start with US Exim Africa Trade webinar. You know, this gets contextualized in this US-China prism, but, you know, ignoring the Chinese angle, the US clearly is seeking to make its presence felt on the continent more intensely. We saw that they've been providing liquidity to a number of people. Strive Masiwa and his data center is one example of that. In Nigeria, they're looking to finance the entry of Safaricom and Vodacom into Ethiopia, another example. So I think, you know, one has got to not ignore the US presence. They are seeking to make a push, and it will be interesting to see what comes out of this webinar, particularly in the context of trade, simply because China has overtaken the US in most relationships on the continent. StanChart Zambia, headline figure EPS down 500%. As we all know, Zambia in many respects has been the canary in the coal mine last year. We've had you know, a significant fall in the value of the kwacha. We had the default on the Eurobonds. We are informed that they are in discussions with the IMF. As I've said before, I don't think anything will happen before the election, simply because the IMF will typically bring conditionalities which won't allow for the ruling party to splurge some cash ahead of the election in order to get them over the line. So I don't think that result will come through. And I think, you know, StanChart is just informing us of how complicated and how tricky the Zambian environment has been, not only for banks, but for many others. Chase Bank liquidator story. Chase Bank, as you know, was liquidated by the central bank here in Kenya. The good assets were bought out by SBM, State Bank of Mauritius, and there's a residual portfolio that was left, and that essentially that's where the central bank is now appointing the Kenya KDIC to basically sort that out. And I think once that happens, then they've very satisfactorily concluded what were some quite difficult situations that they found themselves in late 2016 with a number of the smaller banks. Chase was one, Imperial Bank was another. And I think one has to give credit to the central bank for navigating what was quite a tricky path. But they have essentially tidied that up. You've seen the entry of new, stronger banks into the market, and you've seen a process of consolidation, which has to continue and is, in my view, a good thing. Ethiopia, Abay Bank profit stagnates. It's interesting, I was reading The Economist this weekend, Temple, and the Ethiopian government is talking about growth this year of about 8.1%. The IMF thinks it's going to be 2.1%. You could drive a truck through those forecasts. And I think, you know, the question is the politics. Today, Ethiopia was the renaissance, the poster child of the African renaissance, the Africa rising story. You've had this tremendous turbulence in Tigray province, which has sucked in Eritrea. And essentially, as far as I can see, I don't think Prime Minister Abiy can control Tigray and control the rest of the country, where you've got equally restive regions. And therefore, you know, the question is, when does Ethiopia return to a path of political stability? And until that happens, I think it's going to be quite complicated for corporates and investors in Ethiopia.
Thank you very much, Ali, for this analysis. Bosun, I guess you're jealous about Kenya-Canada relationship at this point. There's a new MOU brewing.
Yes, essentially, the UK-Africa Trade Investment Forum today was such a big one. We're looking at that very closely. I think there'll be a whole lot to consider when that comes through later in the day. But again, the Standard Chartered earnings, which will be released today, it was the P&E statement that was released over the weekend to the Zambia Stock Exchange. There was a whole lot of write-down of bad loans, as it were. So earnings per share slumped. The whole numbers were not really good. In fact, the bank Standard Chartered said they were the first in Zambia to do this write down massively and to disclose what they've written down. And they talked about the currency. You know, Ali always talk about the problem with the Zambian authorities, with the currency, the kwacha, and a whole lot of others. And all of that actually impacted on the operations of Standard Chartered in Zambia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bosun. Let's now move on to the Western African headlines. So we've got Nigeria's registrars sabotaging unclaimed dividend reforms, says sources actually. The Securities and Exchange Commission, Nigeria, OK's VFD Group 4.1 billion naira rights issue. And you've got Yinka Sani as now Standard Bank Group's new CEO for Africa. Nova Merchant Bank reports some 3.52 billion naira profit for the full year 2020. UnityBank, one of the listed banks on Nigerian Stock Exchange, releases its full year 2020 earnings at 11 a.m. today. We'll find out what to expect from that company. And of course, Ghana government concludes AirtelTigo takeover process. You have in Senegal, Remus offers to buy FARs as Sangoma's offshore assets. That's some oil and gas story over there. Chimba, you've got registrars sabotaging unclaimed dividends. I mean, how possibly can this be?
I'm not exactly familiar with this particular news source. What I am aware of is I know that there was some news earlier this year or late last year about how the government is looking to tap funds from unclaimed dividends and dormant bank balances to help support its budget, and there were a lot of outcries against this. I'm not now sure how the registrars are playing into this particular scenario, but I would like to speak to the VFD news, how they have gotten SEC approval to issue do a rights issue of 1.4 or 4.1 billion naira. So I know that the VFD group, which is a group that has its hand in a lot of pies, really. It has an asset management subsidiary, it has a BDC, it has a real estate subsidiary, has an apartment listing subsidiary, car loan subsidiary, a lot of things basically, which are very important factors in the economy. They are very important areas for growth. So I think that, and I know that in 2018 they were able to successfully issue do another rights issue as well as a private placement for about 9 million units, and they were both oversubscribed. And so looking at this current rights issue that they're embarking on, and interestingly, reading what the CEO had to say about it, he said the funds will be used for expansion, not just any expansion using technology. And if we look at technology in the country today, globally, technology has been responsible for, a lot of great returns that we have seen recently. If we look at the ICT sector in Nigeria, which is, one of the sectors that is mainly driven by technology, we can see that that sector has, posted a lot of significant growth in terms of GDP. Even when we saw that we were in a recession, the sector was still able to post significant growth. So I think technology is something that is very important, and given that this company is trying to expand based on that, I think investors would see it in a positive light, and I think the turnout for this issue would be very positive. Also, one thing that struck me for the company is their valuation. I remember I went back to look at the amount they were issuing, the 9 million units in 2018. They were issuing it for about 60 million naira. Now compared to 7 million units for about 4.1 billion naira. That tells you that their valuation has really skyrocketed, and it just means that there's a lot of potential for growth. So I think it's a very positive one for the company, and investors will be keen to partake in the issue. The next one I'd like to speak on is Airtel Ghana concluding Airtel takeover. So I know that Airtel entered into Ghana, I think 2017, if I'm not mistaken, and that was with, using a merger. And with that merger, they were the second largest telco company in the country. However, with MTN and Vodacom taking over the top two positions, they have been demoted to number 3, and according to the company, that is not in line with their strategy, so they are leaving. So in this scenario, I think Ghana is gaining a bit, because with the transfer of assets or the sale, we are seeing that it is being done at a sort of discount, because the company is taking a voluntary impairment loss on the sale of its assets. So I think that is very key and very positive for the company, for the country, given that the telecommunication sector is a very important sector in the growth of any economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these insights, Chima. I appreciate that. Bosun, you've got the floor for some of these headlines here. Yes,
I just want to speak to very quickly the registrar story about the unclaimed dividend, and this was sources over the weekend, which was because at the CMC, at the Capital Markets Committee meeting of the SEC, which was held on Thursday, and a bit of a briefing on Friday and all of that, the whole issue came out about why has it taken many years for this unclaimed dividend issue in Nigeria not to be resolved, and now we're having an increased volume of unclaimed dividends, despite the fact that the SEC and the stock exchange had done dematerialization and all of you. And what we're hearing from stockbrokers on the ground was that the registrars are right in the middle of the whole unclaimed dividend issue. They are the ones who are making it difficult for investors to get their accounts sorted out. The whole verification with the CSCS, the SEC set December last year deadline for the whole account verification and for you to regularize your account, which a whole lot of folks have done. But what we're hearing on the ground was that the registrars and the companies that have very huge accounts of these unclaimed dividends were playing games with it, because this money is in their accounts. Right. So the stockbrokers just buy and sell. There's no problem, Temple, with capital appreciation and how you get it on the Nigerian market, but it comes with dividend. So the registrars are making things difficult. They're still requesting or requiring investors to submit paperwork instead of going electronic or digital. So that's the issue here. And the issue actually came up that, look at the ecosystem in Nigeria. but the registrars are the one who have direct link. Tempo, I'm sure you know this as well. The registrars are the one with direct link to the companies that pay dividends. And the registrars are the one that post dividend warrants to shareholders, not stockbrokers. So if there is a delay in unclaimed dividend and the volume of unclaimed dividend is rising, even with everything that the SEC, the NSC, the CSCS has done in the last 5-10 years, then it's only at the doorsteps of the registrars.
Thank you very much, Bosun. I can truly relate with what you're saying. I mean, before I came over here, I had to try out something that some folks in UK had been complaining to me about regarding registrars in Nigeria, and that is that if you get a form that you can download from the SEC website for a particular company in relation to a registrar, you fill it and you scan it and send it to Nigeria, they do not honor that. They don't recognize that, and so your dividend is just left back in the registrar's account here. So I tried that out to apply for a particular dividend, and it went through. Well, maybe because they know me and they can easily identify me. Maybe that's why my own case is different. But for a lot of people in London, they've been complaining about this particular development. Yes. And it's something that we do hope that we will be able to address.
The fund sits with the registrars. So the question is, what do they do with the monies?
True.
That's where a lot of stockbrokers are complaining, and I've heard this from 1, 2, 3 different reliable sources in the market, including CEOs of stockbroking firms, that the registrars are the ones playing games with this unclaimed dividend money. So they want it to accumulate so that they have slush funds to play games with and not ready to pay it out.
This calls for engagement. This calls for engagement with some of the registrars. Let's hear from them and see how they want to clear the air on that in that aspect, actually. Let's move on to the Southern African headlines before us. Eskom's got two largest workers' union wanting 15% wage hike before May the 4th. African Bank, you have new CEO Bungane looking towards a bigger financial platform change. Higher fuel prices drive Botswana inflation up by 3.2% year on year for March, and of course February is 2.4%. Namibia's inflation is at 3.1% in March versus 2.7% in February. Prospects raises $5.03 million for Acacia lithium project in Zimbabwe. Let me come back to you with these headlines in South Africa, Ali. I'm sure you believe that these are more woes for Eskom now that their staffers are asking for a wage hike of about 15%.
You know, with inflation in South Africa, very benign. This 15% wage hike request is like way above the inflation rate. I would have thought, given the fact that the balance sheet is under so much pressure, it's practically impossible for Eskom to meet this, and therefore this is a negotiating stance. It will be interesting to see how this develops. I'm not sure about the specific situation at Eskom. I mean, maybe they haven't had a wage hike for a period of time because of the challenges that the state-owned enterprise has encountered. But I mean, I think the optics of 15% is going to be impossible, not only for the government, but also for the management at Eskom. Just to track back a little bit and touch on the Rand, I was looking through the currency performance of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And really, South Africa has been an outlier in terms of the Rand's performance this year. We're at 14.27. Brazil under tremendous pressure. Russia, the sanctions, the Ukraine situation has put pressure on that currency. India has dropped about 3.1% just this month alone because of the COVID situation. So South Africa is very interesting in that context, a real outlier. With respect to Botswana, you know, again, this is within the limits of the inflation rate. Of course, Botswana imports quite a bit of food. That's also going to be something we have to look at. And this is a big problem I saw in West Africa, for example, where food prices have surged, not only in Nigeria, but in the neighboring countries as well. And as you know, food inflation, when you're at the bottom of the pyramid, is considerably higher than the reported number because you're having to set aside much more of your income to spend on food. So keep an eye on the food inflation number. Namibia's inflation at 3.1%. That's up quite a bit, February to March. And then finally, Prospect raising cash for the Arcadia lithium project. It's interesting because it confirms that, you know, Zimbabwe is making some headway in the international markets. This is investors ponying up cash for a project in Zimbabwe. And I think the finance minister will take that away as a small step in the right direction.
Thank you so much, Ali. Thanks a great deal for those. Chima, it appears that Nigeria is not the only country under inflationary pressures. You've got Namibia and you've got the case in Botswana at this point.
Well, yes, it's very interesting to see, like Ali pointed out, food prices, which is the major cause of inflation for Nigeria. It's not only affecting Nigeria, it's affecting neighboring countries. For Botswana, at least we can see that it is fuel prices that are, you know, the main proponent of the higher inflation that we're seeing. And, you know, in Nigeria as well, we can also see that that is a pressure point for us. So it's just interesting to note that the same issues are affecting a lot of all these African countries in terms of crude. In fact, for Nigeria, we can even say, oh, we are able to produce a bit of crude oil. So the imported inflation in terms of importing crude oil can still be set off from the revenue we make from, you know, exporting crude oil. But for Botswana, it's not the same. You know, they don't produce any crude oil at all. They just have to import oil from refining countries. So I think it is just something to note. It's something to watch out for. We can see that Namibia's inflation is also inching up. I remember, I think we saw, I can't remember the country, but last time I was here, we saw another country which had reported higher inflation numbers. So it's just, I think it's just the trend we're seeing for now, increasing inflation numbers, and the pressure points are really just common across these countries.
Thank you very much for that contribution, Chima. Appreciate that. Let's move on now to the Northern African headlines before us. We've got the Financial Regulatory Authority in Egypt okaying or approving ULA investment capital hike to 6.875 million Egyptian pounds from 5.5 million Egyptian pounds. Abu Dhabi Commercial Bank also gets offers to sell stake in Alexandria NMC. You have Finley's obtaining 200 million Egyptian pounds in mid-term loan from Bank Misr. Morocco's got its Sound Energy Afriquia Gas partner for a liquefied natural gas project. And of course, in the Tunisian Stock Exchange has the Banking Union for Commerce holding its ordinary general meeting on April the 27th. Before I come to you, Ali, let me hear Bosin's thoughts on these headlines in the northern part of Africa.
I think I would just look at the issue of Morocco. Morocco is moving on very fast and furious with clean energy. They're not leaving any stone unturned when it comes to clean energy, whether it's LNG or they're doing solar energy as well. They have one of the largest solar energy fields in Africa. LNG is also very strong. They are neck to neck with Egypt, by the way, in terms of getting new investors into the market. And I think this is something really highly commendable. So the deal between Sound Energy and AfriCaya Gas is just getting the locals and others to get investment together and get in bed with this new form of energy that is getting every investor's attention around the world.
Thank you so much, Bosin, for that. Well, Ali, it looks like this Bank Misr has got a lot of cash to throw around for a lot of companies to make do with, right?
Yes. You know, I think liquidity is not an issue in these North African banks, you know, so I think, and also access to liquidity, you know, whether it's out of the UAE, whether it's out of the big multilaterals. So I think it's quite an interesting situation we've got developing here, because I think increasingly these North African banks understand that they have to be Pan-African players. Some have started much earlier, but increasingly I expect to see more and more penetration by well-funded North African banks south of the Sahara. And I think that's going to be a development worth watching.
Thank you very much, Ali, for that contribution, and that's a wonderful analysis. I appreciate it so much. Thank you as well for commencing the show with us this Monday. We really appreciate it. Chima Okadike, thank you. I think you now deserve the position of the First Lady of Frontier Africa Reports now, because you have been regular on the show. Thank you, Chima Okadike from Vetiva Capital Management. Ali Kansachu, thank you always for your rich analysis. We appreciate you. Botswana Fire Executive Editor here at Frontier Africa Reports. Thank you for your wonderful addition or contribution on this show. This has been the first edition of the show for this week. You have yourself a beautiful week ahead and a profitable one. I'm Temple Ashaji. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.